Lately, Drake has been facing setbacks at an alarming rate, making it hard to keep track of them all. However, the most revealing sign of his declining career is the abrupt cancellation of his It's All a Blur, Big as the What tour. While speculation has swirled around ticket sales and logistical challenges, the real reason behind the cancellation paints a much clearer picture of Drake's current struggles. But before diving into the details, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps a lot. And with Drake and his team doing their best to downplay just how disastrous this cancellation is, your support ensures that the truth gets out. Now, back to the tour. The way this cancellation unfolded is nothing short of baffling. When official statements were released, they only raised more questions. The reasoning given? A scheduling conflict. 4 of Drake's 16 scheduled shows in Australia and New Zealand were postponed due to this issue, according to the statement. But even a brief look at this explanation makes it clear that something doesn't add up. Drake and his team sat down to craft a cover story for why an entire tour was being abandoned, something unprecedented in his career. And yet, the best excuse they could come up with was a scheduling conflict. For anyone familiar with how tours are planned, this claim is simply unbelievable. A massive tour like this is booked months in advance, with every date carefully mapped out to avoid conflicts. There is no scenario where a scheduling issue suddenly appears this late in the process, especially one significant enough to cancel multiple shows. To make matters worse, a follow-up statement from Drake's camp attempted to clarify the issue, claiming that a 12-day gap between concerts made it impractical for Drake and his team to stay in Australia for that long. But again, this excuse falls apart when you consider that these dates were locked in well ahead of time. If this was truly a concern, adjustments could have been made long before tickets were sold. With all this in mind, it's becoming increasingly clear that the scheduling conflict narrative is nothing more than a poorly executed cover-up. But if that's the case, what is the real reason behind the sudden cancellation? If scheduling conflicts weren't the true reason behind the cancellation, then what was? The most plausible explanation is also the most damaging to Drake's reputation: poor ticket sales. Despite his team's attempts to spin the situation, there's mounting evidence suggesting that demand for the tour simply wasn't as high as expected. While Drake's team claimed the shows were sold out, seating charts from various venues tell a different story. Many tickets remained unsold, and some sections had significantly lower demand than anticipated. This aligns with what we've already seen from his previous tour stops. Not every arena was packed to capacity, and even the energy at these performances felt lackluster. Clips from his concerts reveal a stagnant stage presence, with Drake often singing along to pre-recorded tracks rather than fully performing. The result? A show that many have described as uninspired and repetitive. On top of that, audience interactions haven't exactly helped. Instead of engaging moments that hype up his fan base, we've seen viral clips of fans holding up signs begging for favors or Drake barely delivering a memorable performance. In a time when his career is already under intense scrutiny, these shows have done nothing to revitalize his image or reignite excitement around his music. If ticket sales were indeed struggling, Drake had 2 choices. Number 1, go forward with the tour and risk performing in half-empty arenas, exposing the reality of his dwindling influence. And number 2 is cancel the tour and craft a believable excuse to avoid public embarrassment. Given how carefully Drake manages his brand, it's not surprising that he and his team chose the latter. But instead of taking accountability, they resorted to damage control, hoping to divert attention away. Only raises more questions. If poor ticket sales were the main reason, why wasn't there an attempt to adjust pricing or offer promotions to boost attendance? Why was canceling the entire run seen as the best course of action? Drake's team clearly hoped that this sudden cancellation would fly under the radar, but instead, it has only fueled speculation that his grip on the music industry is slipping. And the bigger problem? This isn't just about one tour, it's about Drake's overall standing in hip-hop right now. Drake's tour cancellation isn't just a one-time misstep, it's part of a larger pattern that suggests his dominance in the industry is fading. For years, Drake was untouchable in the rap game. Every album, every tour, every move he made seemed to solidify his status as one of the biggest artists of his generation. But now, it's becoming clear that his influence is waning. One major reason? His ongoing fallout with Kendrick Lamar. Drake has spent much of his career avoiding direct competition, carefully positioning himself as an artist who transcends hip-hop beef. But after the release of Not Like Us and Kendrick's String, of victories in their rivalry, Drake's image has taken a serious hit. The public perception of him has shifted drastically, with many questioning if he still holds the same weight in rap culture. And it's not just Kendrick. Drake is also competing with artists like The Weeknd, who has effortlessly transitioned into selling out stadiums worldwide. Meanwhile, Drake is struggling to fill arenas, a stark contrast to the level of success his peers are experiencing. This raises a critical question. If Drake is still the global superstar he claims to be, why isn't he able to sell out these shows effortlessly? The answer lies in the way he's handled his career in recent years. Rather than evolving with the times, Drake has leaned into the same formula, a mix of melodic hooks, commercial rap, and surface-level lyricism. While this approach worked, for over a decade, fans now expect more. They want innovation, they want risk-taking, they want substance. But instead of delivering that, Drake has focused on maintaining his status, rather than pushing his artistry forward. And now, it's catching up to him. Even within his core fan base, there's a growing divide. On one hand, you have longtime supporters who will stand by him no matter what. But on the other, you have fans who are becoming disillusioned with his lack of creative growth. This disconnect has never been more evident than now, as his album sales and tour performance fail to meet expectations. And with hip-hop constantly evolving, Drake's refusal to adapt may be his biggest downfall. And if he continues down this path, the cancellations and missteps will only keep piling up. Drake's team didn't just cancel the tour, they carefully crafted a narrative to control the fallout. But in doing so, they only made things worse. Instead of addressing the situation transparently, they pushed a false explanation about scheduling conflicts. Then, as skepticism grew, another excuse was thrown into the mix: the 12-day gap between shows that supposedly made it impossible for Drake and his team to stay in Australia. But here's the problem. None of this makes sense. Tour dates are locked in months ahead of time, and logistical gaps between performances are common in the industry. If this truly was an issue, adjustments could have been made long before ticket sales began. Instead, the abrupt cancellation suggests that Drake and his team were scrambling to find a way out without admitting the truth, and it doesn't stop there. There's another layer to this: Drake's ongoing efforts to frame himself as a victim of industry suppression. By canceling the tour in such a chaotic way, his team may have seen an opportunity to spin the narrative, suggesting that forces within the industry were working against him. This is a familiar tactic. When his recent album underperformed, similar claims were made about chart manipulation and industry bias. Now, by abruptly ending his tour, Drake's camp can once again suggest that outside forces, rather than declining demand, are the real reason for his struggles. The goal? To rally his remaining fan base and reinforce the idea that he's being unfairly targeted, and in some ways, it's working. Hardcore supporters are buying into the idea that Drake is being blocked by the industry, while critics point to the cold reality: his numbers are simply not. If Drake were still at the top of his game, no amount of industry suppression would stop him from selling out shows. Fans dictate success, not industry conspiracies. At this point, the situation is no longer just about one failed tour. It's about the wider cracks forming in Drake's career. And if he doesn't change his approach, those cracks will only deepen. With the cancellation of his tour and the declining public perception of his career, Drake is at a critical turning point. For over a decade, he dominated the charts, shaped trends, and maintained an untouchable status in hip-hop. But now, we're witnessing a shift, one where his influence is no longer guaranteed. The most damaging part of this situation isn't just the cancellation itself, it's what it represents. If Drake can't sell out arenas in places he hasn't visited in years, it raises serious concerns about his long-term relevance. Meanwhile, his competitors, The Weeknd, Kendrick Lamar, even younger artists, are securing stadium tours and gaining momentum. The comparison is unavoidable, and in every way, it makes Drake's struggles even more apparent. So, where does he go from here? Drake has two choices. First is to continue down the same path, refusing to acknowledge his decline while leaning on weak excuses and false narratives. And other one is to rebuild his legacy, taking accountability, evolving artistically, and finding new ways to connect with fans. Right now, all signs point to him choosing the first option. Instead of making meaningful changes, he's doubling down on the idea that the industry is against him. But the reality is simple. Fans decide who stays on top, not industry conspiracies. If Drake truly wants to secure his place in the future of music, he needs to move differently. Otherwise, this won't be the last time we see him scrambling to explain away a failing project. At the end of the day, this tour cancellation is a wake-up call. The question is, will Drake listen? Let me know what you think about the situation. Is this proof that Drake's career is truly in decline, or do you think he can turn things around? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps a lot.